It's Carlton French. Welcome back to episode 12. As Clayton and I were talking about him coming back for part 2, we thought it'd be amazing to have his wonderful wife, Brittany Nedza, come and tell their story together. Brittany, honored that you're the first woman to be on the podcast.
I didn't really know how to date. I remember crying. Being like, God, I want to be married so bad.
Didn't expect that it would be when I was 30 and getting married shortly before turning 31.
You are making the second biggest decision you will ever make in your entire life.
Wouldn't it be really funny if you met your husband?
Everything can change in one day. That's really like the joy of following Jesus.
I was afraid of getting married. Being single is way better than that.
Yeah.
way better than that. I'm not getting divorced.
Why wait till marriage? No one's doing that.
We are not going to be having sex before we get married. We're not even coming close. You're not married until you're married.
Y'all coming on and sharing your story hopefully will encourage other single men and women listening that, okay, here's a real example of people that actually did it, and here's why it was better.
It's been better than anything I could have ever imagined.
If God has a plan for you to get married, there is nothing you can do to not meet that girl.
Yeah, it's my husband.
It's totally worth it.
Challenge yourself constantly. You have to be a little bit patient.
I felt like I was in a hole looking up.
The whole idea is you have to become content in singleness.
I'd be lying if I said I haven't fired off some Instagram DMs.
The word dating is not mentioned in the Bible.
I dedicated my life at Tomorrow World to Jesus.
Welcome to the Single Man Podcast, where we delve into candid conversations with Christian men about their journey to faith, advice for their younger selves, and navigating dating. With a heart to reach men from all walks of life, dive into real stories of redemption, growth, and the hope found in following Jesus. I'm your host, Carlton French, a 29-year-old single Christian, and I'm excited for you to listen to this week's episode. Let's jump into it. Hey, it's Carlton French. Welcome back to episode 12 of the Single Man Podcast. I'm here today with my good friend Clayton Nedza again after last week's part 1 of Clayton's story, where we went into his journey from being an atheist to converting to Christianity, and we were just wrapping up getting into his dating story. And as Clayton and I were talking about him coming back for part 2, we thought it'd be amazing to have his wonderful wife, Brittany Nedza, come and tell their story together. So hopefully that this will be an encouragement to all the single men and women that are listening, and how the two of y'all waited for the Lord to ordain your relationship, and how y'all dated in such a way that was honoring to God. I think is going to really be encouraging and inspiring to single men and women listening. So honored to have both of y'all here today.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's proof that I'm not full of it.
Yeah. We got proof that
I got proof. She's here in the flesh.
And Brittany, honored that you're the first woman to be on the podcast as well.
Yes, I'm so honored and pumped to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, of course. So I'll give a quick intro on you specifically, Brittany, since the audience will have met Clayton in last week's episode. And if you haven't listened to episode 11, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to last week's episode with Clayton to get his story before listening to this episode. But Brittany grew up in Atlanta, and the two of y'all met when you were 30, and you had been raised in church, but you said you really had come to have a personal relationship with Jesus when you were 25, and that came through a breakup and just kind of like figure out, what really was God doing in your life, and you really wanted to go more all in with your relationship with God. And you started to get plugged in at Passion City Church, which is where the three of us all go to church now, and how I met Clayton through our men's Bible study. And what's kind of crazy to me is that you started serving, and it wasn't until 5 years later that the two of y'all met, and you both were going to the same church and were plugged in and serving. And it's kind of wild to how God had y'all wait until you were 30. So anything I kind of left out there, Brittany, you'd want to touch on?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, I was surprised too. I had gotten to the point where I was like, I don't think there are any, I told myself, oh, there's no good guys at Passion. And my Flourish mentor said, wouldn't it be really funny if you met your husband at Passion? And I always think about that because I had no idea what God had in store. And, you know, when I started going to Passion, I was like, oh, maybe I'll meet someone, you know, in the next couple years. And had really been hoping for that, and also didn't expect that it would be when I was 30 and getting married shortly before turning 31. But, you know, it's been better than anything I could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's crazy to me is looking back on the whole timing, that Passion City Church is a big church, but it's really not at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy to me that Brittany and I were both, and we were both serving on basically the same team, touch team, at the same location. So at 515 for years. And never, not one time, met her, saw her, nothing. And what's amazing is that the timing of it, we've talked about this a lot. I don't know that it would have worked any other way. And we can get into kind of Brittany's story at some point, but her going through, like, we met a week and a half after you graduated from Georgia Tech.
Yep. Yeah. So I was going to Georgia Tech from 2019 to 2021, and I was working full time and going to school at night.
Go Jackets?
Go Jackets.
No, Brittany.
Well,
go Dogs.
For academics, I have Georgia Tech. For football, I have Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had to sneak that in there, Clayton. You know.
That's fine. Whatever.
Well, so then the pandemic hit, and, you know, we're all isolated, and I was like kind of talking to God about, I was like, I'm kind of lonely, and God was like, well, you don't have any time for anyone. You don't really make time for anyone. And it was true. I would kind of race out of church and be like, oh, I got to go study. And, you know, I think he was calling me into a different type of friendship too, to make time for people. And that's when I was kind of thinking, like, okay, I don't really have time for a relationship, maybe after grad school. And so I graduated on December 17th, and I met him on January 3rd.
Wow.
So the timing was great.
Yeah. And so it's like, you know, had we met even 2 months earlier, a month earlier, she might not have been, and I was in law school.
Yeah.
So I was kind of in the mindset of, I thought maybe I could have met my wife while I was in law school, but I did not think any way ever that I would get married while I was still in law school.
Right.
And so, I mean, meeting Brittany was the timing. It couldn't have worked any other way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So great.
Yeah.
Before we jump into how y'all actually met, which is a crazy story in and of itself, would y'all just give like a high level what it looked like kind of before y'all met in terms of dating? Like, how did you pursue relationships previously, and maybe why none of them ever worked in the past?
Yeah, of course. So I had one other serious relationship other than Clayton, and it was when I was 25, and he was in the military, so it was a long distance relationship. So I think that had something to do with it. And I also didn't really get to see his character really because of the long distance. And so I found myself in a position where, so when I graduated from school, I had lived with my parents for a year, a little over a year, and then I moved out into Atlanta. And then this relationship happened, and then we broke up, and I found myself without a place to live. So I didn't re-sign my lease, and I had to move back in with my parents. And I just felt like I had taken a huge step back. And just with everything in the relationship, I was like, this just isn't who I am. And I was thinking about the type of woman that I wanted to be. And I think, you know, I grew up in church and I had those roots, and I was like, that's the type of woman that I am. Like, I want to be running after Jesus. And I had gone to Passion Conference a few times. So I just had that in the back of my mind. And so we broke up. And then the next Sunday I started driving to Passion and accepted Christ. And that's when I really started having the personal relationship with God.
This is when you were 25.
Yeah, when I was 25. and started serving, met a new roommate, moved back, and life was amazing from there. I went to grad school, and I had been praying a lot about meeting my husband, and I dated some wonderful guys from Passion. It just didn't feel like the right guy for me. I also think God had some refining to do in my soul, and it just wasn't the right time for me. And I also think that Clayton is my perfect match. I think he's the man that God ordained for me. I think it was literally the perfect timing for us to come together. God's working on him separately. He's working on me, refining both of us. And we're just our relationship is so wonderful. I'm so glad that nothing else ever worked out.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. And for me, it was I had no compass.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine you're just trying to navigate anything in life, and you have no direction other than what you want. And so I wasn't able to really think about the long term, what am I really looking for? What do I really want? And so I was completely lost in trying to date. And when and that was in college, and then I got out of college, I became a Christian, and so I didn't really know how to date like a Christian.
Yeah.
I didn't understand. I knew, the cliche statement of the key to a successful marriage is center, God in the center, right? I didn't understand what that really meant. How do you do that? And so that was a struggle, because it just isn't very well modeled. And so I just couldn't. And when you look back, and once you realize wow, God is so good, you look back and you're man, thank you, God, that none of those other relationships worked out. And so I kind of just spent really I was so good with being single.
Yeah.
That I got to the place where I was just man, my life is amazing, and I will not settle. I will not under any circumstances in any category. I will not compromise in any category of significance. And I didn't. Brittany is incredible in every single way, and it just, God totally ordained that.
Right. Yeah. So awesome. And even in the last episode, you mentioned, Clayton, how you heard this sermon from Brett Yonker, and you were trying to hold on to this $5 bill, and God was just give it to me. I've got $1 million coming.
100 million.
100
million.
100 million.
Yeah, I heard that in the last episode.
Yeah, you did. What else did you hear in the last episode?
Well, so in the last episode, you didn't call me annoying, but it was
no, I did not.
It was we need to have grace, and if someone's being annoying, you used to be dead and now you're alive in Christ, and so that's why you need to give Brittany grace. And I was is he saying I'm annoying?
No,
but I
Brittany,
know you're not.
And then I followed that up with,
and then she's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, or something like that.
Yeah.
So that I found funny. And then I don't want to take us on a tangent, but that we're never getting a cat.
Yeah, no, we will not.
I can't come over, Brittany, if you all get a cat.
All right. My theory is that all the men have band together and said that you guys have all decided that you're allergic to cats. And so it's just oh, I'm allergic.
Yeah,
and I think that's
the cat. We'll never have a cat.
Anyways,
if you don't know what we're talking about, go back and watch episode 11.
We can cut this out.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to dating. No more cats.
So I guess transitioning into now, y'all are both 30, right? You're serving at Passion Conference, which, if people are listening and don't know what Passion Conference is, it's a big conference here in Atlanta, Georgia, put on by Passion City Church with 50,000 plus kind of 18 to 25 year olds from around the world that come and just worship Jesus and hear messages. And y'all are both plugged in. at Passion serving on Sundays at church, and there's an opportunity to serve at the conference, and you both said yes. And that kind of, I guess, wasn't how you were planning to meet your spouse, right? But that's kind of ended up what happening, right?
Well, it's definitely a great place to find them.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you know, and serving at Passion Conference. So like that was my 3rd or 4th year in a row.
Yeah.
Doing it, and every single time, man, it is just, it's a lot. I mean, serving at Passion Conference is such a sacrifice. And so I think about it and I'm like, wow. And it is so amazing at how this whole thing goes full circle. I was like, every year comes around and I'm like, I'm out. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that again. It is so time intensive. It is so hard. I mean, the people serving at Passion Conference are really serving, and you're getting to Mercedes-Benz Stadium at 7 a.m. and you are typically leaving Mercedes-Benz Stadium at like 1 a.m. And so you have 6 hours from leaving Mercedes-Benz to get back there, and that includes driving and sleep and all that. It's a lot. And so I was like, I'm out. I don't want to do it again. And so, but I had served obviously before, and every year I serve with Ashley Van Ryn, and she was just like, Clayton, you gotta come, man. You gotta do it. You know you love doing that. Like, just, you always do this. Just come serve. Just, you can leave at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
I'll let you leave at 10 a.m.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But just get there through that first wave of people. And so, you know, I served at Passion in 2022 at Mercedes-Benz again. And I was like, okay, like I'm going to do this one more time, really. And so, yeah,
that's crazy. And that was funny too, because Passion 2022, that was my first Passion conference. And I had been coming to our group for like 6-7 months at that point. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, what is this Passion conference thing? Like, let me show up to it. And I remember you like getting me down onto the floor with all the guys.
Oh, dude, that was so awesome. I had like reserved. I mean, I was just taking people down to the floor level, putting them in the.
Yeah. So you're like serving, you know, what you said last episode, like he who refreshes others will be refreshed.
Yeah.
So, and then kind of what's your perspective, Brittany? So you're serving at conference. Like, why did you decide to serve?
Yeah. So, I was in a big like singles group at the time, and a girl in the group, I remember she walked up to me and another friend in the Oval, and she was like, you should serve Passion Conference. Like we need door holders. And so I decided to do it. I had served before and had a great experience. And I was like, that sounds like an amazing way to start my year. So why not? Let's do it. I'll sign up. So I signed up, and when I got there, I found out that they had placed me on the outdoors team. And so I was a little skeptical about that, because the first day, it was 2 days that year. The first day was raining and the second day was freezing cold.
It's in January as well.
It's like 37 degrees and raining.
It's very beginning of January every year. And I was like, you know, trying to have a good attitude, and I was like, okay, let's do this. So we had the rain day, and then I was coming back for day 2, and I had all my ski clothes on, like everything. And I remember just trying to have a positive mindset about it, and like walking in, and I saw Brooke Litterwood. She opened that night with my favorite worship song, King of Kings. And it's just always amazing to see so many college students praising God in that arena, and to think, you know, I've gone there for sporting events and concerts, but here everyone's praising God. And like, I also had the thought that this is probably the largest gathering of people praising God on earth right now. Like it has to be, and how amazing it is to be in the room. So, I had that mindset, and I saw Clayton on the first day. I was friends with Ashley Van Ryn, and he was on her team. And so I saw him, and I thought he was really cute. I was like, oh, who's that guy? I don't recognize him. I haven't seen him around before. And, you know, I was like, oh, okay, he's cute, you know, noted, I guess. Yeah. And then the next day, you know, I was all bundled up. And so I got on the elevator, and this is like jury's out. if this really happened. But in my mind, I thought that he followed me on the elevator. And still I'm like, you followed me on the elevator. And he's like, no, I didn't. So I don't think he followed me on the elevator. But, you know, I had like a little crush on him, and I was thinking, oh, this guy followed me on the elevator, whatever. So everyone's wearing the black t-shirts, and I had on my white ski coat. And so Clayton stood next to me, and he goes, are you ready? And he gave me a fist bump, and I was like, yeah, I'm ready. Kind of like, I'm ready to brave these frigid temperatures. And then we just like introduced ourselves and started talking, and we kept talking, and I accidentally got out on his floor. I missed my floor and I got out on his, and then I got a little embarrassed and I had to go back on the elevator. And he was just like, I'll come find you later and we can talk. Like, I'll come find you later. So I go and I do my shift, and then I come back into the door holder suite with my friend, and here comes Clayton. He's walking up to me with this like megawatt smile, and he's like, I just remember thinking like, wow, this guy's so confident. And he just goes, hey, I've been thinking about you. Like, how did your shift go? And later on, my friend goes, I've been thinking about you. Like, that guy's interested, you know, because it was just very bold. And I remember he got me a more comfortable chair. So he got me this, like, I was sitting in maybe a folding chair, and he got me this like padded chair, and he arranged it so that we would be facing one another to talk. And I'm like, okay, so we're about to talk. And we just like introduced ourselves, talked about everything. I remember telling him about my interests, and I think I said I like doing yoga, and he was like, well, when are we going to do yoga? So it was pretty clear that he was interested, and I think I was just so attracted to his boldness and confidence. And I also thought, like, I was worried that he might be a player. I'm like, oh, he seems really confident. Maybe that's a negative thing, and just kind of like not wanting to get too excited, and not wanting to like get my hopes up, because I thought, oh, this, maybe he's not who I think he is, basically. That was kind of my first impression, and awesome. Just setting the stage, if you will.
What about you, Clayton? What was kind of your perspective on things?
This chick's hot.
Yeah.
That's what I first thought. I mean, I did. I was like, wow.
When's the first time that you remember seeing her? Was it in the elevator, or did you follow her?
No. I saw her before the elevator.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Well,
it all comes
I can't remember. I really can't remember when, but I remember it might have been right after the elevator. You were talking to somebody else. I was like, what is that girl doing talking to somebody else? I want to talk to her.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I'm figuring who this girl is. I don't know who she is, but I'm figuring that out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That might have been after actually our conversation when I pulled you aside and like we said, have a seat.
Have a seat.
And we just talked for a while.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I remember thinking just two things. Number one was I obviously thought she was incredibly attractive. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like the first kind of lens that you really see anybody. But I was like, man, this girl has an unbelievable attitude and has been out in the cold rain serving all day. And she is pumped full of joy. And I was like, oh, that is awesome. And so that was kind of like, I want to know who this person is. Like, who are you?
Yeah.
I am intrigued at who you are.
And so this is after the elevator. So y'all get in the elevator. Mm-hmm. You're like fist bump.
Well,
like,
I mean, and so like before this, and when I look back on it, it's insane. I mean, this is all written out in my journal, but God had told me very clearly that I would meet my wife in under a year. This was in September. I would meet my wife in under a year, September 21, and she'll be wearing white. And so I'm in Passion City. I'm at Passion Conference, and everybody's wearing all black except one person. She's wearing a white ski jacket.
Yeah.
And I mean, every door holder is wearing, like, you wear black.
But did you think of that when you saw me?
I didn't until after I got back, and like after Passion Conference, I was like, wait a minute. She was wearing white,
Yeah,
you know, and like that was really, I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah.
That's awesome. So then y'all make plans to meet up or something after the conference, or how did that kind of go?
Well, so I had kind of looked him up on social media.
I think I got your phone number.
Yeah, you got my phone number.
Yeah, I asked you for your number.
And I didn't have his. And so I was like, well, I can't text him. And so I'm just waiting for him to text me. And I remember like talking to my sister, and she's like, he's going to text you. It's okay. I'm like, okay, fine. You know what? If he does, that's great. If he doesn't, no big deal. And I looked him up on social media again, and I noticed he had a lot of followers. And I'm like, like, I don't remember him having this many followers before. And I only have like Instagram and Facebook, so I wasn't on TikTok. But right after we talked, he went down, and his role was like passing out wristbands on the floor. And a college girl had taken a TikTok video of him and said, I have a crush on this guy. And she like described him and took a video of him and said, help me find him. And it went viral. It got a few million, like 2 million views. And so he had like all of these girls requesting him on Instagram.
Yeah, that was one of the craziest. I mean, I was standing there, and Brad Teddy, who's amazing, and I are trying to I think it was right around dinner time, and all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up. And I have never, ever experienced anything like this. Like, when I say blowing up, I mean, it is literally nonstop of like just notification. I'm like, what is happening? I'm getting text messages, phone calls. I just like, my phone is blowing up. And I mean, I got in about a 10-minute stretch, I probably got 100 follow requests on Instagram, and my account was, and it's all girls.
Yeah.
Like every one of them is like all girls. And it was so funny because like I was praying about meeting my wife, and I'm like, I want to meet my wife, and God's like, I'm bringing her to you. Like, you don't have to do anything. And then all of a sudden,
he was telling you that in your quiet time.
Yeah, in my quiet time, and this is all journaled out. And then all of a sudden, it's like, boom. I mean, I got 1,000 followers or 700 followers in a day, or something crazy. And I had to change my account from private to public because it's just like, I mean, and I was thinking, wow, this is literally like when God told Peter to just cast his net on the other side of the boat.
Yeah.
I was like, I have so many what am I supposed to do? I mean, there's so
yeah.
You know, start going through these and figure out which one's wearing white. I don't know. Like, how do I figure this out? And you know, not to belabor it too much, but I went on one date with Brittany, and I just was like, yeah, I'm deleting social media. I'm not getting distracted by any of these other. I'm focusing on this one right here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Which was amazing. And like well, anyways, I'll go to our first date. So he did text me, and something that stood out is he planned an activity for us. I think I was used to like guys being like, oh, let's grab a drink. And I had, at that time in my life, I was really considering like my relationship to alcohol. And I was like, I think I want to do a year break from drinking. I didn't have like an alcohol or like a problem with drinking, but I was like, I just don't want this clouding my judgment. I don't know if I want this in my life. So I had talked to my dad about it, and so I was going into the year kind of with that mindset. I was, you know, starting off serving, just trying to like really make a commitment to God. My friend Claudette and I, we like usually spend New Year's Day together. So we spent New Year's Day together praying, and we prayed that everything would be centered on Christ for both of our years. And at the end, she was like, I think like, what if you get married this year? And I was like, haha, that, you know, so funny, probably won't happen. So January 3rd, I meet Clayton. And then January 7th, we went on our first date. And so he took me ice skating. And I was so excited about it, also a little nervous. I was like, what if I fall? But this is such a fun, fresh date idea.
Yeah.
So I remember being more excited about that date than I ever have any other date. And my parents could tell. They were like, you're so excited. Something felt really different. And so he picked me up, and on the way there, we were like laughing right off the bat. And before we got into the ice skating rink, he told me his testimony. Like, he told me what God was doing in his life. And I had never seen someone so just like excited and passionate to share their testimony, like let alone a guy on a date. And it was so attractive to me because I really was wanting someone who truly did love the Lord, like not just went through the motions, but who really had a heart for God. And I saw that in him. And at the end, he goes, and I could sense it. And he was like, I just want to let you know that I've taken a year off of drinking. And I was just like, in that moment, I was like, yeah, it's my husband. There's no way. Like, just like everything is lining up. And I think it was his just passion for God. Yeah. And then just everything lined up. We had an amazing first date. And
I mean, we literally, and that's something. If there is one piece of advice that I would give guys trying to figure out how to date, like what do you do? How do you date? Number one, you date in a way that honors God. So that is first and foremost. Your first date, and this is so critical. I believe this with everything I've got. Your first date needs to be an activity.
Yeah.
On a totally practical level. It needs to be an activity. And the way that this works best is you coordinate the date, you plan it, you have a plan. And then you let them know. And I gave Brittany 3 choices. We could go ice skating. We had talked about doing yoga. I would not recommend yoga, but we had talked about it when we had first met. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to be about what we talked about.
Yeah.
If she wants to go to yoga, like we can do that. I said that I would. Yeah. We can go to yoga, or we can go walk around Piedmont Park. Yeah. Those were the 3 choices. Which would you prefer? She selected ice skating. And then I let her know, and I just wanted to make it really easy for her of, okay, I would love to pick you up. I'm happy to do that, or we can meet there. Yeah. Which would you prefer? And so now she's like, and I get it, like it's a different time. Yeah. But when you do that and she says, it's okay, you can come pick me up, that'd be great. Okay. I'll be there at 4:30. And I mean, and so, but I gave her the option. I didn't want her to be uncomfortable. I didn't want to be awkward and say, hey, what time do you want me to pick you up? And she's like, I don't know you at all. Right. I don't want you coming to my apartment. Like, I don't want you to know where I live. Yeah. And so I just tried to think about from her perspective. And so gave her the option of like, I'd love to pick you up. I'm happy to do that. Or we can meet there. Here's the address. Which would you prefer? Yeah. And so we went on our first date, and it was an activity, no alcohol. You should not have any alcohol on your first date at all. You shouldn't really have alcohol when you're dating, frankly. Yeah. It is, you are on the ultimate pursuit of character evaluation, and alcohol clouds your judgment, and it clouds your ability to make wise decisions. And you are making the second biggest decision you will ever make in your entire life when it comes to who you marry. And so, yeah, we conducted our whole relationship. We decided not to drink because we talked on our first date about our physical boundaries, and we were like, first date
at the ice skating rink.
Yeah,
no, on the way to get ice cream.
Yeah. So we had ice cream, and then we went and got dinner, and then we went and got Jenny's ice cream at the end. And we were driving around getting ice cream, and we were just talking, and I can't remember who brought it up, but it was like, this is how I envision the relationship. I want to wait until marriage. Like, I don't want to you were leading the conversation well. And I remember being just like so relieved, because I think in other relationships I had like hopes for that and communicated it, but the guys wouldn't always like be on board with that, and it makes it difficult. And then, you know, if someone is kind of like pushing you to go past your boundaries, it's like, okay, well, this doesn't work. And so he was leading us in that direction, and it was so peaceful and great.
Yeah, and it was just like so direct. I mean, there was no beating around the bush. It was, hey, I just want you to know that I really do believe that God designed sex for marriage, and we are not going to be having sex before we get married. We're not even coming close. And we can get into like like how we actually did that,
right?
Because that was hard. Like that is not easy. But we were just totally on the same page, and it was like we had these rules, boundaries in dating, to where there was no horizontal laying, none. You're not allowed to horizontally lay with each other. No clothes come off.
Yeah,
like that. There's no need for that at all. And it got to the point where I would start to beep at Brittany.
Yeah. Everybody's talking about
that. So I'd be beeping at her like she'd
like if we were kissing or something and it became like too much, he would go beep and he would beep me
like a backup
and it like
beep.
It started being hilarious, you know, because it's like, this is funny, but it did help like keep us on track with that. And then also not drinking
so critical,
helped so much, because you know, I don't know if we would have sustained that if we were like, you know, going to dinner, having drinks, and then
you're not going to
happen.
Yeah. You're making this is already hard enough, right? And you know that it's the right way to do it. It's inarguable. And I think statistics show like the percentage of couples that wait to have sexual intercourse until they get married, their marriage is, and I don't quote me on this, but the Porch did did a whole sermon on this.
Yeah.
And it is like the divorce rate is so low.
Right.
And that was another thing, is like, I was very clear. I'm not getting divorced. I will not do that.
Yeah.
And we talked about all that stuff and just like from the very beginning. So it wasn't I think it was like really intentional in that way. Like you don't have to be corny about it, and it's not corny at all. Actually, the girl is gonna really appreciate you just being, hey, this is here are the rules of engagement, right? Like, we're gonna honor God completely in every single area, and that's how I started the conversation. Like, hey, you're not mine, you're God's.
Yeah, that's something that stuck out from our dating, is that I think I said, you know, like one time, like, I'm yours. And he was like, no, you're God's. And he treated me that way throughout the whole relationship. And so that was just so special to me. I think one of the questions that you sent, and because I've been thinking a lot about it, was, do people who wait until marriage have a better marriage? And so I was like, And I think a lot of Christians are divided on this subject. You know, even like friends of mine are like, oh, that's outdated, or it's unnecessary, or you kind of, it's just like an underlying, like, yeah, it happens. Like, yeah, of course we're going to like move in together and like sleep together. Just kind of, that's the way things are now.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, like, I lead a group of young adult women, and I think a lot of them are wondering, like, is this really important? And, you know, I can still have a great relationship if I don't. And so I was thinking, why should someone pursue this? And really it comes down to like obedience to God, and what you're looking for in a partner, in your husband or wife, your future spouse, is someone who like authentically loves Jesus and who will be obedient to Christ. Like, you know, as a woman, like, we're called to submit ourselves to our husbands. Well, like, I want to do that, and I want to find a man who is submitted to God. And so it all comes back to that. And so if you have a guy who is pressuring you to hook up, or is like, yeah, like, you can sleep over, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I think the underlying thing is he is not that concerned, or she is not that concerned with true obedience to Christ. And so, like, I would question, like what their faith looks like. And of course, like things happen, and sexual purity is hard to maintain. Like we both like, you know, have struggled with it, and like it is not easy, but I think just like having that desire to pursue it is important. And like I first started really considering it when I read Ben Stewart's Single, Dating, Engaged, and Married.
Yeah.
And I don't know, God just kind of sanctified me over time to where I was like convinced that it was the only way, you know, to go.
Yeah.
And I will say it is the only way. I wouldn't trade ever in a million years. Our marriage is so wonderful. I mean, it is, I can't even explain how amazing it is. There is zero shame in our marriage.
Yeah.
No shame. And it is completely, which is amazing. Like that is so awesome, having no shame in your marriage.
Yeah.
It is the best. And so, and I will tell you that is only possible by obedience to Jesus and following God's design. And he has a design. Like it is not a complicated message. Like you don't have to parse through a lot of data to figure out the reality of it. Marriage was designed by God. It is to emulate the same relationship that Jesus has with his bride, the church. And sex is designed to only occur within that covenantal relationship. That's it, right? And so you can get into all different questions and degrees of like, well, you know, what's too far, everything. But no, don't do any of that, right? You want to honor Jesus. You can honor Jesus and have a wonderful, you need to figure out how to talk to this person. Right?
Yeah.
Like you need to figure out who this person is. You need to study this person. And when you're dating somebody, and the other thing that it'll do, frankly, is it'll speed it up.
Yes, I was thinking that too. Like it makes your evaluation process so much quicker. I have a close friend, and she was dating someone, and they, you know, they didn't do anything physically, and you know, it was going great, and then she was just like, you know, I don't think this is my husband. I don't think this is a guy for me.
Yeah.
And they broke up, peaceful breakup, no trauma, you know, nothing. It's like, okay, you know, move on. And it's just there, you don't have those scars. But I do want to say, if anyone's listening and has taken it too far, that there's nothing that God can't redeem from your story. So I don't want you to listen to us and be like, I can't attain that. Because God is all powerful. He can wash you white as snow.
And he will.
He can
does.
take any past sin or brokenness and redeem it. So like if someone is listening and has sinned in the past, like it's totally possible to, you know, repent and turn a new leaf and like have that purity. Cause I think like growing up like in the 90s, and like early 2000s purity talks, I think they were mostly focused on the girl, and it's like never like, you know, just don't have sex. And I think purity is more like, that's one aspect of it, but it's also encompasses how you walk, like what you put in your mind, the music, the TV shows, movies that you watch. So it's so much more than that. So I don't want anyone to think that you're impure if you have, you know, sexual sin in your past.
Yeah, I think that's part of my story before coming to Clayton's group and getting plugged in at Passion. You know, I had sex before I was married. I'm not married now. I'm single.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is what everyone's doing. You know, that's all that I had known was just everyone's having sex. And like, why wait till marriage? No one's doing that.
Right.
And so when I got plugged in with the group and got to see guys like Clayton who were committed to not having sex until they were married, I was like, okay, it's actually possible. And so I think y'all coming on and sharing your story hopefully will encourage other single men and women listening that, okay, here's a real example of people that actually did it, and here's why it was better.
Right. And it's Carlton, it's not even close to how much better it is. And to piggyback off of what Brittany was saying, In the word, it tells us those who are sinning, they might repent and turn. And then in the end, you think like, what do they find? And the word says, and find mercy. And so what God is doing, and he says in the Old Testament, I will take away all their sins in one day. And I think that is, wow, that is so unbelievable. And then he also says, I will remember their sins no more. And so it's not that conversation that you have with God of like, hey, God, do you remember like when I was doing that? He's not going to look at you and be like, yeah, but it's okay. He's going to look at you and be like, no, I don't actually.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
That's gone. The old is gone and the new has come.
A new creation.
A new creation is here. And so like your relationship, and I'm fortunate and thank God every day for my marriage. And it's amazing. And God has blessed us with an incredible marriage. It's beyond anything I could have asked for or imagined. However, and I really do think that is because we followed Jesus in our dating and how we dated each other. And that he is literally the foundation of our entire marriage. Like he is the bedrock of our family.
Yeah.
However, even if we did not do that, and had we had not, God could have still produced what he has produced in us, but it's not a risk that I was willing to take.
Yeah.
And so I would say that anybody, if you are living in, if you're in a relationship, if you have any sexual sin, and like, if you're like, well, what does that mean? You know exactly what that means. Any type of sexual impurity in your relationship, if God wants you to marry this person, he will not require you to operate outside of his will and his word in order to get what he has planned for you. He just won't do that. And so your relationship can be completely reconciled, rectified, and everything start like it can happen in a day. He says, I will wash away their sins in a day, in a day. And so you have the ability to stop doing that, and it will not fracture your relationship. I mean, if you're both really committed, if you're not committed to Jesus, it will destroy it. Stopping having sex with your significant other will destroy your relationship. And you cannot understand now, but at some point you will understand. That's a miracle happening, right? Like you both have to be committed. And what Brittany was saying earlier is so true. This isn't like girls lead us and like we're going to just like wait to not have sex because that's what she wants to do, or vice versa. Like I knew that I couldn't do this if she's not completely on board.
Right.
So you both have to be completely on board. And if you're not both completely on board, you should not get married. I mean, you just shouldn't. You have to be on the same page on as many topics as possible. And this is certainly a huge one.
Yeah.
In order to have a marriage that absolutely rocks.
Yeah. So great. Yeah. I know it's gonna really encourage everyone that's listening. So really appreciate y'all sharing that, and just being a great example of how God designed relationships and marriage to be. So getting back to when y'all were dating. Okay, so you have the first date, and then you have the beeping rule, like when things are getting too serious. So what was it actually like evaluating each other without having the alcohol, without having the sex, like, and then what was it like? Okay, should we stay together? Should we get married? Should we break up? Like, because those are the only three options, right? Continue dating, get married, or break up.
Right. Yeah.
Well, first we like stopped at our first date. So we had kind of an epic third date, if you will.
Yeah. I mean,
we can skip that one.
Yeah. No. Unbelievable. Go Dogs. That was amazing.
Your third date was at the national championship where UGA won a few years ago. Yeah.
I mean, and that's so awesome. But one thing that we did, and we have introduced this into our Bible study that Carlton was talking about, and it was about and actually Garrett Owen. If you're ever listening to this, Garrett, you're the real leader. Garrett Owen started dating this girl, Emily, early on in the group, like back when we were 10 people.
Yeah.
Right. And he's like, hey, this relationship's serious. I really like her. I got this book called The Meaning of Marriage, and we're reading it. And so we just started referring it to that as the book.
Yeah.
That book is, other than the Bible, that is the single most important, best resource that you could possibly have when evaluating who you want to date or who you want to marry.
Yeah.
And so I knew, watching Garrett go through it and Nicholas kind of like all these guys start going, and I'm like, okay, I want us to go through this book together.
Right.
And that was huge for our ability to objectively evaluate whether getting married is a good idea. And Brittany brought something up earlier, and it's such an important point. You're not married until you're married. And you want to, I mean, from my perspective, I don't know what you have to think about this one, Brittany, but you want to make it as easy as possible to walk away if you realize that this is not the deal. And so sex complicates that.
Yeah.
Right. And so Brittany and I, we got this book, and it was moving. I mean, our relationship was moving fast.
Yeah.
It was moving fast, and we both we knew what was going on here.
Yeah.
I mean, we just couldn't stop spending time with each other. It was like, oh my gosh, this person is so amazing.
Right.
Introduce the book, and I'm like, look, I know that we need to do this. And I just said, hey, there's something I want us to go through together. It's called The Meaning of Marriage. The whole purpose, and we had this conversation on our first date. The whole purpose of dating is to get married. Like, that is the end goal of dating.
Right.
It's not to have a good time. No, it's to get married. And so we just kind of came at it from hey, at the end of reading this book, we will know if getting married is a good idea.
Yeah.
And we went through it every single week. We had meetings to go, and we went chapter by chapter through this book.
Yeah, I would send him notes. So like I would read a chapter, send him notes with questions. Like we were taking it really seriously. Like this is part of our evaluation process to see, if we have the same values. And it was also like spirit led. God was leading us like through the whole process of reading the book and through dating. So I think when you date like that, it's just like, I mean, it was moving quick, but it moved even quicker. But it also felt slow at the same time, which is so interesting because we were so thoughtful about it. And I had never dated like that before. I'd never had that experience before where I was reading a book and about the meaning of marriage and learning so much about just what God intended for marriage and what is the relationship of marriage and what should it look like and everything. And at the end, it was just like an easy yes, like, yes, I want to get engaged. And yeah.
And the reason that book is so important is because it causes you to talk about things you otherwise wouldn't talk about.
Yeah.
Or that it helps facilitate really, really good conversations. Perfect example, gender roles.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Whatever you believe, you and your spouse want to be on the same page with gender roles, right? And so like how are you gonna just talk about that?
Yeah.
Hey, Brittany,
Let's talk about gender
let's talk
roles
about
now.
our gender roles in marriage.
Yeah.
That's a hard conversation.
Yeah.
But his wife actually writes that chapter of the book.
Oh, okay.
And
it's by Tim Keller.
Yeah, by
Yeah.
Tim Keller.
It's
The
a great
Meaning of
book.
Marriage by Timothy Keller.
I'll put it in the description for people that are listening.
Phenomenal. And I would say don't read it until you found somebody that you're like, I want it. Like, this is legit.
Yeah.
But some people I know have read it like as single people. It's phenomenal. But it just helps facilitate these conversations that you need to have that you don't even know that you need to have. And you learn so much about the character of the person, and are we on the same page with this stuff? I mean, you have these dissensions and marriages, and a lot of people that I know that don't have, like the people that I know that don't have a great marriage, they're not aligned on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And they kind of want to have, and I'm not saying you don't have your own deal, like your own, like, hey, I really I like playing golf. Brittany's not a huge fan of playing golf. You know, it's okay, like, to have separate hobbies.
Yeah.
But you want to be on the same page in basically every single area that you could possibly be on the same page on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think also throughout our like dating evaluation process, we looked at a lot at our two separate families, and they're so different, and how we were raised, and just talking about how that would impact our marriage. I think Clayton was afraid of getting married for a little bit because his parents are divorced, and they had a pretty traumatic divorce. And so I think looking at that, and he is very sensitive to any type of discussion around like adultery and divorce. And not that I'm not sensitive about it, but my parents are still married, and it was just kind of like, yeah, I'm never doing that.
Yeah.
But seeing like how much that like hurt him, and it's just like, wow, okay, this is really serious, you know, for us and our future family. And so we took it really seriously when we looked at like, you know, both of our families. And you know, it also gave me a new appreciation for my parents, and that they, you know, my dad remained faithful to my mom, and they have a wonderful, you know, marriage relationship. So, but still there's things about theirs that I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if I necessarily want to emulate that. So it was like an interesting process of like looking at both situations and being like, I like this. I'm not sure if I want to keep that. So we had a lot of discussions around that, a lot of discussions around fear of like, we're not going to get a divorce. Like, you don't have to be afraid of that. And, also, I felt very at peace. I was like, I'm not in a rush to get engaged. Like, this is moving fast, but if you are feeling fear, let's work through that. And you don't have to like propose super fast. Like, there is no pressure. And I just felt like there was no pressure the whole time. And like, I wasn't like chasing a ring or something like that, or need to get married before a certain age. It was just like, I am just following like God's spirit, and, you know, he moved us, but like we had lots of discussions around those things.
Yeah. That's awesome. So then at some point you finish the book and you decide, okay, this is it. Like, let's get married. What was that kind of thinking like for you, Clayton, kind of leading the relationship?
Well, so I was in law school, and God had been telling me, you need to take a lot of hours in the spring. And so I actually had to go get a waiver from the school to allow me to take as many hours as I was taking. And I say all that to say, like, God knew what he was doing. And so for me, it was like, okay, I've never met anybody, and I was thinking about this this morning when I got done with my run. Brittany is better in every single category by far than any other girl that I've ever met or dated.
Yeah.
And I knew that when we were dating. And so it was really, I was afraid of getting married, but I was actually more afraid of me than I was of her. And I had to trust God and just be like, okay, God, I'm ready. Like, I know that I'm ready. And I will never meet somebody like this again. Like, this is the winning lottery. I mean, it is. And so you're an absolute moron if you don't marry this girl.
Yeah.
And I called my friend Mookie. And so for me, like, I have this family who is so important to me. And it's the DeMosses.
Yeah.
And I love the DeMosses. And they, to me, are the beacon of light. And I will go to Mr. DeMoss when I really, like, on very few, when I need it. And there's very few times when you really need it. Figuring, like, should I marry this girl? That was one of those times. And so I called him and I said, hey, Mr. DeMoss, I got to talk to you. I mean, I'm freaking out over here.
Yeah, yeah.
And I went and talked to him. He's like, well, come over tonight. And he's so amazing, man. And I'd always said if I could pick one marriage, it'd be the DeMosses. Like, I want that one. I want that life.
Yeah.
And he had told me, if you want to get where somebody's at, you borrow their map.
Right.
And so I went to him and I was like, this is what I'm thinking. And he goes, dude, you need to marry her. I mean, and then I called his son, who's one of my best friends, Mookie. And I just told him, hey, man, I'm afraid. You know, like, I got to be completely honest with you. I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And he's so amazing. He's like, well, let me just read Psalm 34 to you. And it was like, and in Psalm 34, it says, I sought the Lord and he answered me. He delivered me from all of my fears. And I just was like, man, there was not a single red flag, not even close. There's not a cautionary flag. Every flag is green.
Yeah.
By a million miles. And it's just like, this is amazing. And so, yeah, let's get married.
Just like that.
Yeah. And so we went just when we said we were going fast,
yeah,
I met her on January 3rd. I asked her to be my girlfriend on January 10th. And I proposed on May 1st. And we were married August 28th.
Yeah.
So I went from "Are you ready?" in an elevator
8 months
to "I do," and less than 8 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
8 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Faster than, I mean, you couldn't go faster. It really.
Right.
I mean, that's as fast as you can go. We've met people that have gone faster.
Really?
But I mean, come on, that's like freaking. That's fast.
Yeah. Well, people would think probably like, oh, well, how did you really know? 8 months, like you need to see them through a year or 2 years. Oh, you never had sex.
We got those comments.
Yeah.
You must. I think it's like a new thing that's been going around. It's like you must date the person in every season of summer, winter, spring, fall.
Or you got to have a big fight.
Yeah.
Oh,
and we do not fight. Brittany and I mean, we obviously, when we
have like disagreements, but I think people were like, you need to see her mad because I have like a very calm personality. Like, I'm not going to get into a shouting match. Like, it takes a lot for me to get super, super angry. So I think people, like they saw my like calm disposition and they're like, well, you need to see her angry and upset, and which is valid. Like, I think when you're dating someone, you want to see if they have, maybe unhealthy anger patterns, but
like, how do you guys really handle some intense conflict? Can you guys work through it?
Yeah.
And my friend was at our wedding, and so some of my friends at the wedding were kind of talking about it, and it is fast. I mean, you got to just admit it, like, that's fast.
Sure.
But it was amazing. It's God's timing. When he says in the word, it says, when I act, who can undo it? And so
also, just really quick, I don't want to interrupt you, but we did have a lot of conflict in our engagement. It was like a lot of spiritual warfare that we dealt with.
Not between you and me.
Not between you and me, but like outside forces. And so we definitely had to like work through conflict together. And it was just a lot of like pressure, just outside issues that came in. And we saw that with, it's common. And so we did have some conflict that we worked out.
Well, we did, but the point that my friend made, and this is so good for anybody listening.
Yeah.
My other fraternity brothers were basically being like, how do you even know? And my friend said, you know what, that's a good question. How do you know you love somebody? And he said, because I know people that have been dating there's some people that have been dating for 2 years. They're not married. 5 years, they're not married. Clayton and Brittany, they're married and it's been 7 months. So how do you know?
Yeah.
And they couldn't really answer that because what he did was basically prove time is not part of that equation.
Yeah.
And he said the answer to that question of how do you know you love somebody is when you decide to. That's how you know, of when you make the decision that I don't care what comes, I'm not leaving. I choose you. And really what it is, and I forget whose quote it is, but what it means to be a man is to be able to make a decision and stick to it. And that's the same with your relationship with Jesus. And I'd asked my dad, I'm like, Dad, like, how do I know? And he said, well, are you committed to Jesus? I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, are you committed to Jesus for today? Because the whole idea of forever was like hard.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm committed to Jesus forever. And he was like, okay, well, why is it different? I was like, well, that was a good question.
Yeah.
I guess it's not.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was just
Yeah.
the decision to marry Brittany is phenomenal. Like, that is such a great decision. And that's kind of how that all went down.
Yeah. So great.
Yeah.
Amazing. So now y'all have been married for how long?
Almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in August.
2 years in August. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're both 32 now.
Yeah.
Yes, we're 32.
Yeah. So now, okay, almost 2 years married. You're both 32. If you could go back to when, you were 30, before Passion Conference, like even before that, maybe when you were 25 going through breakups, like what do you wish you could go back and tell your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Yeah. I would tell my younger self that it's all going to work out. I would tell her to pursue Jesus, and you don't have to go on a date with someone that you don't want to go on a date with, just to give them a chance. And even if you don't have, prospects, because I think people encourage like, oh, you should be dating. And, that is you should get yourself out there. But I think,
Well, but get yourself out there means like,
go serve at church, go meet people, be in community. But I don't think, there were many times where I would go on a date that I didn't want to go on because to give someone a chance. And I don't think I ever had to do that. I think I could have sat back peacefully and just waited and enjoyed it more and worried less.
Yeah, that's good. How about you, Clayton?
My advice to me would be the same advice I give to all the guys, and that is don't look.
Yeah.
Don't spend 1 second looking for her. You should focus on yourself, pursuing your relationship with Jesus, and have it, and just soak in this time with your friends as much as you possibly can, and enjoy it. And just know that marriage is amazing. Like, it is the best. Marriage is so, I remember crying, being like, God, I want to be married so bad. And I didn't know how amazing marriage was going to be. And so I would just tell myself, hey, Clayton, it's going to be better than you could ever imagine. But this season that you're in right now is way better than you think it is.
Yeah.
And just enjoy it as much as you can. And honestly, part of it is, and what I tell anybody who goes through a breakup is write them a thank you note. I'm so grateful, man. Oh, holy cow.
Right.
I am so grateful that I got to marry Brittany.
That those didn't work out.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And, looking back on being single, I did amazing stuff. I had a great time, and my life is better today than it's ever been.
Yeah.
I went on a cross-country road trip with one of my good friends, one of my best friends, Austin. That was amazing. You should do more of that, right?
Yeah.
When you're single, there is nothing holding you back from getting in the car and driving from here to California.
Yeah.
And you should do that.
Yeah.
Or just go on a random trip alone. And I did that. I went skiing for 10 days by myself. And so I would just that would be my advice. Focus on doing that. If God has a plan for you to get married, there is nothing you can do to not meet that girl.
Yeah.
Or guy.
Yeah. So great. And like even starting our group, probably wouldn't have been possible if y'all had been married. You wouldn't have had the time maybe.
And I wouldn't have gotten married if I didn't start the group. I would, like, you guys held me accountable in ways that I could have never known that I needed. And really, you guys are the reason why. I mean, I can't be about honor God in your relationship when I'm single. And then all of a sudden I have Brittany in the picture. And what happens?
Yeah, you're not honoring God.
I'm not honoring God. I'm doing what we were talking about last night in Romans 3.
Yeah.
Right? I'm blaspheming the name of God. Like I am being a hypocrite. And I didn't want to do that. And so it really held me accountable in ways that I owe to the group. Like you guys held me accountable every single week. And it wasn't a lot of weeks that you had to hold me accountable because I was only with Brittany for about 25 of them before we got married. Which was,
Well, yeah, I remember you coming in being like, this is going fast, guys. Like, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
isn't that crazy?
It can happen fast.
We were only dating for 25 weeks.
It was fast.
That's fast.
We're moving fast.
I mean, between dating and engaged.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, did you want to say something, Brittany?
Well, I did have one more thought on the singleness. Like, also, like, I don't think singleness is just a holding stage until you get to marriage. Like, it's a full season. And, some people might not get married. So, like, I'm trying to say you can have a full, wonderful life walking with Jesus single as well.
And Paul actually says that's actually better.
Right. Undevoted attention to the Lord.
Right. That's actually better. And so I don't, for me, like being married is amazing and I love it. But if God has called you to not be married and to remain single, you should do that. That is as good as life can possibly get, like, cause you're following what God's telling you to do.
Yeah.
And I'll say this too. Being single is incomparably greater than being in a bad marriage. I cannot imagine how bad a bad marriage is. And my heart literally breaks for people that are in bad marriages. And one of the guys who's a great mentor to me said, like, marriage is like the seasons, and sometimes it's winter. And so, in the meaning of marriage talks about this, like, just you've got to just hang in there and keep putting Jesus in the middle, and you will get through that. But I can't imagine how bad a bad marriage is, because it just would be like terrible. Yeah. Being single is way better than that.
Yeah.
way better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So great. I want to touch on one thing. So now y'all are married, and in theory, you're making the kingdom better, right, together than you were separately. And we just had this awesome experience a couple of weeks ago, Clayton, where you got to be the one that was officiant of Logan and Brittany's wedding. And Logan was on the podcast in episode 5, if you'd missed his story. But just like what was that? I know, Brittany, you helped Clayton a lot through that experience. So wanted to give you all a chance to kind of talk about what it was like seeing someone that you had been able to pour into kind of then get married, and you'd be able to play such a big part in that.
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, it just goes to show you that it's the right way, and you cannot argue with that. I mean, watching Logan and Brittany, how they did it, the path that they're on. I mean, they did it 100%. They did it the right way. And it's an honor to be a part of that. And to have Brittany, I mean, like, Brittany was, we were so blessed by the person who married us, the couple that married us.
Yeah.
And Brandon and Abigail Sloan were such a blessing to us, and are such a blessing to us. And so we were just like, man, if we can be half of that for somebody else, we want to do that. And we just took the approach that we want to do for you what Sloan and Abigail, I call them Sloan, did for us. And they were just available, man. They were there to talk to us. We would go to their house, we would have dinner and sit in their living room and talk. And they made it clear there's not, and we saw their normal life, you know, they had their kids, they just welcomed us into normal life, and they sat with us in any questions that we had, any fears that we had, anything. And they were so valuable for us. And we wanted to do that and for Logan and Brittany, and having Brittany by my side. I mean, she was the one. I'd be leaving working, and she has a job too. Like, Brittany carried the load, man. She'd get home from work and make dinner for the four of us. And she cooked dinner. We met, what, 4 times? She cooked dinner
3 or 4 times. Yeah, I cooked like 2 or 3 times, I think.
Yeah, and so you're like, wow, that is just so amazing. And then, like, actually helping with the script and giving her input, and like, because I'd never done that before.
Right.
And so it was just amazing, and it was a great moment for our family, and we're honored to do it.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very cool seeing you up there in your element, just, I guess, in a new way. And I thought you did a great job.
Thanks, babe.
Yeah.
You did a great job.
Thanks. So.
Yeah, it was so awesome. I've only been to 4, 5 weddings ever, and only 2 Christian weddings. And it was just the most like beautiful thing most holy thing I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
And I was talking afterward with some of the guys, like, well, I could have just stayed at that wedding forever. And if that's anything like Jesus's love for us as his bride, as the church, like, wow, I can't wait for eternity.
It was an awesome wedding.
Yeah.
But it's going to be even better in heaven, man.
Oh yeah. I can't believe it. I can't wait.
Yeah.
So great. So want to wrap up with this. One thing I ask every guest that comes on. So let's say, there's single men, single women that are listening now. They've sat here through the whole episode, an hour, 15 minutes plus. What's one thing you want to kind of leave everybody with that, is currently single now? Like, what would your encouragement be to them?
I would say it's worth it to honor God in everything. It's 100% worth it. It's worth it to have a relationship with God if you're thinking about it. And singleness is for a purpose. So you're not just floating around, waiting to meet someone. God has intended it for a purpose. And so I would encourage you to follow him and to read what he says about singleness and marriage. And it's a time, like, if marriage is on your heart, it's a refining process. Like, I look back and I'm like, oh, God was refining me the whole time, and was, growing me in my relationship with him. And just don't lose heart. I brought my journal today because there's literally journal entries where I'm like, should I get on the dating apps, and praying about getting on the dating apps, really hoping to meet my husband. And then there's an entry that's, I met this guy at Passion Conference. His name is Clayton. I'm really excited about him. And so my life changed one day when I volunteered at church and walked into an elevator. So just don't lose heart. Literally one day, just everything can change in one day. That's literally like the joy of following Jesus. It is. Yeah. He can do anything, and nothing's too hard for him. Did you want to like specifically read any of the journal entries? Yeah. I know you brought it to. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. We'll give you time to think about your takeaway, Clayton. Yeah, of course. Oh yeah. All right. So January 1st, I'm writing, I'm feeling very blessed and happy going into this new year, talking about what I did on New Year's. And then on January 2nd, I wrote, so there was a guy that I was interested in, and he had gotten engaged. We had gone on one date, and he was a strong Christian, and he lived in a different state, and I was, it wasn't going to work out. And I saw that he got engaged, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, it's not going to work out. That's okay. And so at the end of that entry, I wrote Proverbs 23:15, there's surely a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off. And just, my mindset going into passion is like, okay, like, let's see what God does. And I'm really praying for this. Just got done serving at Passion Conference 2022, and it was incredible. The most amazing start to the year. I wrote another one of my favorite verses, Luke 1:45. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord will fulfill his promises to her. And then January 6th, I wrote, met a guy at Passion Conference this week that I'm excited about. His name is Clayton, and we met in the door holder suite at Mercedes-Benz. We have a lot in common, and I'm attracted to him. Even if it doesn't work out, it shows me how getting asked out on a date should feel. We are going ice skating on Friday.
Let's go.
Oh.
That's awesome. That's one thing too. I Clayton, you're big on this, just like the process of journaling.
Oh man.
Yeah.
You can't. I don't know how to make a decision otherwise. Yeah, we didn't even talk about the journaling thing. Well, there you go. That'd be my takeaway. Start journaling.
Yep.
No, like seriously, every single area of your life, you should be evaluating and seeing, am I as close to Jesus as I possibly can, as I can get? Like you want to get as close to Jesus as you can. When you get married, it isn't like you can all of a sudden develop leadership qualities and wisdom. Like in actually Proverbs, it tells you can't do that. Like you will look for wisdom in the time of need, and you will not find me, and I will laugh at you when calamity strikes. So take this time now to start developing wisdom. Are you tithing? Are you honoring Jesus with your money? That is a big deal for your heart. Okay. And so if that answer is no, your next step for making you ready for marriage is to start honoring God with your wealth, right? Your marriage or your money. Are you serving at church? Like focus on your relationship with Jesus and don't worry about the rest of it, man. And he's going to take care of that. And it's better than you don't want to be in charge of that area. You don't want to be in charge of any area of your life. You want God to be doing that. And he's going to do better than you could ever ask or imagine. And so that would be my advice: is focus on Jesus completely, and in the word it says, do not look for a wife. And so I would say, don't look for her. Like, don't waste 1 second worrying about where she is, wondering where she is. You can wonder, but like really, God's going to bring her into your life when that time is ready. And it's so much better to do it his way. And I would just tell you that it's totally worth it.
Yeah. Wow. So great, y'all. So grateful for both of you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Just grateful for Clayton's leadership in my life the last 3 years. And now Brittany, getting to know you the last 2 years has been awesome. And coming over to y'all's apartment and sharing kind of my story a few years ago. And just like having tangible proof of, this is what I like hope to emulate one day in my marriage,
Oh, it'll happen, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so just really grateful for both of y'all. And thank you for spending the time here coming on and sharing your story. I know it's going to encourage single men and women listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, man.
This was awesome.
Yeah, so
the
great.
Nedzas are a fan.
Let's go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I appreciate everybody so much for tuning in to this week's episode. If it encouraged you, or there's a friend of yours that you think would benefit from hearing Clayton and Brittany's story, I'd love for you to text them the link and tell them, hey, check out episode 12 to check out the Single Man podcast. And I hope you have a great rest of your Friday. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Single Man podcast. If someone you know would benefit from this week's episode, I'd love for you to text them the link and invite them to listen. You never know how a simple invitation could change someone's life. We'll be back next Friday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, with a new episode. Until then, check out the video version of the podcast on YouTube, and you can engage with us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.